You can get that.
Floors, walls, and junctions.
That's right. So for example, Homestar, you can do, if you do a certified passive house, you can get all the energy points for the Homestar tool using Passive House. So we do the part that focuses on the technical engineering side of making sure the building performs well and doesn't get damp and moldy, and they can focus on other things like water systems.
And energy source independence or energy source is irrelevant. Whether you want to put solar everywhere and hook up to a windmill, it's not going to make any difference to what you're doing with the passive house design.
Right. First, you have to get the envelope, the passive parts right.
Yeah.
There is additional badges for doing solar panels and doing a true net zero home, considering storage losses and such. But the main focus of Passive House is just getting the building right. It's the part we're going to leave around for 100 years or more. So if we get that right, everything else becomes easier.
So what do you want to achieve at this conference and with your book? Do you want more people to voluntarily look at building this way if they are building? Do you want some of what is required in here to make its way into building standards?
Yes, that'd be the end goal, is get into the building code itself. There's no reason that a homeowner needs to know that they have to ask for a house that isn't going to be moldy and damp and isn't going to be too expensive to heat. If you build a brand new house, you should be able to get up in the morning and take a shower and go to work. And your house shouldn't have mold problems. Your brand new house shouldn't have mold problems because you did that. But that's the situation we're in some cases.
We're also in the situation of retrofitting an old housing stock. Can you retrospectively get something passive?
Yes, you can. There's an entire standard called EnterFit, which is another marketing challenge perhaps, but it's where you retrofit homes to the Passive House standard. And I didn't have time or space in this book, unfortunately, to deal with that, but perhaps the next one. But it is possible to retrofit to the Passive House standard. There's a large movement in Europe to do that to a lot of existing homes. Matter of fact, you all, Radio New Zealand interviewed Diana Roge-Vorsaz just a little while ago, and she talked about lock-in and the need to renovate with deep energy retrofits to the Passive House standard and not just put a little bit of fiberglass insulation in the ceilings.
That upfront cost, again, you were saying about 10% upfront capital cost, which
for
is what,
yep,
for better or for worse, often focuses people's minds. What did you do at NASA?
So I worked, when I left NASA, I was working on the main propulsion system team for the space shuttle replacement, which was canceled, of course, and historically we know that. So I designed large propulsion systems and ran large engineering teams as the technical lead.
You were making big rockets?
Big rockets.
And now you're not?
No. So I was designing and running teams that designed large paper rockets.
Yeah.
We did some really good testing. It was grand fun. But I looked forward and I was like, well, am I going to do this the rest of my life? Or I had a new son at the time. He was about 6 or 7 months old. Or am I going to try something different? So I talked my wife into moving to New Zealand.
What's a paper rocket? Is it
literally you just design it on paper?
It's like you and me here throwing paper darts. No,
it could be, yes.
Yeah.
So we designed a large rocket, and then it was obvious we weren't going to get funded to build it. So we designed it on paper, and then we set the paper aside, and then in a few years we designed another rocket. And unfortunately, that's how it's been going for a while.
Well, exactly. But suffice to say, if you can design a rocket that can do what a rocket does.
It's the same equations. So houses and rockets are very similar. In some ways, the way moisture works through building assemblies, the way water does, is actually more complicated than some of the physics in rocket engines, and it's actually more difficult to deal with.
Where is the conference this weekend? Can people still go if they're suddenly all excited about this?
Yeah, so the registration is closed at noon today, and the conference is the Passive House Conference at the University of Victoria in Te Aro. And also, actually Saturday and Sunday it's free if they want to go to the trade show from 9 to 4. And Proclaim will be handing out my book for free as well at the trade show, so they can get a copy for free there.
Thank you very much, Jason. There's a link through to the details of the conference on our webpage. There are some images also of the houses we've been discovering. Huge range of houses that have met this threshold. I shouldn't say huge because there's only 24 of them in total. There's also a lovely picture of a sea otter from our earlier interview about the animals migrating to places we thought they wouldn't live, but actually did live about 500 or 1,000 years ago. They're so cute. So plenty on the webpage today. Thanks, Jason. 20 minutes to 11. Carol Bew of the Women's Bookshop. Good morning.
Good morning, Catherine.
I'm just trying to find my bit of paper that will tell me what you've been reading. Oh, Catherine Robertson's latest.
Yes.
What You Wish For.
Yes, a total delight. Now, it is a sequel to Gabriel's Bay, but she's written it so cleverly that you don't need to have read Gabriel's Bay. You can read this as a standalone. It's set in a small New Zealand coastal town with a hill in between this sort of village at the beach and a bigger town. And I mean, in my mind, it sort of could be Golden Bay with the big Takaka Hill going over, but it can be anywhere. It's not named. A wonderful, supportive, loving community. And this is a really funny, delightful book full of interesting, quirky characters. There's Boat Shed Cafe, which is the one sort of a restaurant in the town. And it's obviously a converted boat shed. It's run by Jacko, who is 6'7" and a brick of a man, who actually cooks everything in a frilly apron, which his kids gave to him years ago as a joke, and he proudly wears this frilly apron. There's no menu. He cooks whatever he cooks, and so if you go there for dinner that night, you get whatever Jacko has cooked that night. But people go there because he's a superb cook, and whatever it is, it'll be absolutely delicious. His wife is Mac, who is equally fierce, and they both call a spade, and she is the sort of secretary office manager for the doctor. The old doctor, he was well in his 70s, Dr. Love, from the first book, has been replaced by Dr. Ashwin Gaddavi, who the locals call Ash. And he is a very clever Indian doctor who lacks self-confidence in a way, has come from a very bright, clever Indian family with very successful older brothers. But he is a lovely character, very wise and knowledgeable and discreet, but he feels he's not going to fit in. I mean, this is a community that wears jandals and swan dries, and he can't get used to "g'day, mate." He's very polite. And the development and integration of him into the community is quite delightful. Emma arrives back. She is the daughter of Jacko and Mac, and she's been overseas, and she's an environmental activist, and actually, almost by accident, causes quite a bit of disturbance in the community. There's a group of homeless people and activists, a combination of them, camped by a river on the land of Vic, who is a farmer, and he's an interesting character too. Emma is involved with these environmental activists, and it also that brings up the housing issue in New Zealand. Some of the people living with this group, camped out really, are there because they don't have houses. So the whole environmental issue and the pollution of rivers, because Vic gets into trouble because his farm is, he's struggling really with his farm. And he becomes depressed, and male depression is dealt with as well. And all of this is happening in what is really a very funny book. Kerry, the Englishman who arrived in book one, is still here. He's a red-headed, very talkative Englishman who is a total delight, and the locals call him the Ginger Ninja. And he's in a relationship with Sydney, who has two young boys, and so the whole issue of struggling as a mother on your own with two young children, doing part-time jobs and living off welfare, that is dealt with superbly. And then Kerry's English parents arrive to visit, and Bronner is an absolute character, his mother. They arrive and stay on a cottage on Vic's farm, and Bronner gets Vic, the depressed farmer, sorted out. My goodness, does she sort him out. Those parents, Bronner and her husband, Kerry's parents, when they were in England, used to go on holiday in a caravan called Adventure Before Dementia. And that's the sort of tone of the novel. It's funny, it's sassy, the dialogue is crisp and sharp. You totally identify with the characters. Now, we're not talking about Booker Prize winners here. This is popular fiction at its absolute best. Clever, funny, highly entertaining. There's also Patricia, who a middle-aged woman who had left her husband. They were childless. They had wanted children and couldn't have them. She has left at the end of the first book. She's now back with her very bookish, lovely but rather stuffy husband, Bernard, and she takes on a foster child. She registers herself with the various welfare organisations, and they take on this 9 or 10-year-old boy, Reuben, who is very difficult, but it's dealt with superbly. It's seriously dealt with and is quite moving. And Patricia's patience with this really difficult boy and the way they win him over is delightful. So the whole thing is funny, clever. Kerry and Sydney have a real genuine blip in their relationship that I won't tell you about because I don't want to spoil the book by telling you too much about it, but it is dealt with, again, in a way that is very, very believable and real. And again, they get it sorted. Everything gets sorted because this is the sort of book it is. But the process of sorting various problems and relationships and so on out is done in an absolutely entertaining, delightful and very funny way. I often guffawed on the way through.
Thank you, Carol. Carol Bew has reviewed What You Wish For by Catherine Robertson. It's published by Black Swan Penguin Random House New Zealand. $38 the price. Thanks very much to Carol Bew from the Women's Bookshop for her review. 14 to 11 to Janet Frame's story Mona Minim and the Smell of the Sun. Once again, the reader is Dick Weir.
Mona looked distastefully now at the floral apron, the tiny black button shoes, the yellow sunbonnet. How small they were. The flowers on the apron had faded, and the black button shoes had lost their shine and 2 of their buttons, and the yellow sunbonnet was a dull brown colour. Mona looked down at her grown ant's feet, and then at the 6 diminutive shoes. She knew the woodlouse was right. She had outgrown her clothes. None of these would fit her. She could acquire their smell, though, if they still had the smell of a little house ant. But was that likely? Mona touched and waved her antennae. She had forgotten the house ant smell. Even so, there was no smell here but that of the ribbed, grey-armoured, cream-bellied, close-to-earth woodlouse. She would have to go home with the garden ant smell upon her and risk being attacked and killed by one of the house ant sentries or soldiers. But they would know her, wouldn't they? Even without the house ant smell? Of course they would know her. While the woodlouse, grumbling, retrieved the bed linen of his multicoloured bed and settled once more to sleep, Mona sat under the violet leaf and tried to remember the house ants and Aunt Theodora and Pamela, but it all seemed so long ago, and nothing was very clear, and all that was clear was her growing up among the garden ants. What if the sentries asked her to name well-known members of the house ant colony? What would she say? She practised to herself. Aunt Theodora, Pamela, and... oh, Auntie Reepy. Oh, but then every ant's nest all over the ant world had an Auntie Reepy. An idea came to Mona. She could mention the stair game. She remembered it as being a very famous game, talked of and dreamed of by every ant. Everyone would remember that and realize her house antness at once. Smoothing her red velvet dress and adjusting her sunbonnet with the plan inside it, she left the rest bed and considered which way she would go to the nest of the house ants. She didn't know where to turn, or rather, she might not have known if she had not been given the Queen's anklet that in her first use of it had guided her through the winding green dappled paths of the sunflower forest. Mona supposed that unless the journey had been made without pause for rest or food, she would have to look on the next stage of her journey as her second use of the anklet. She would keep the third use, she decided, to find Barbara and the lost ants. She was glad it was a modern anklet, and that she did not have to coax it or speak to it or chant rhymes to it, as she had heard was the way with some instruments of magic. She touched the anklet. How cold it was! She had never touched anything so cold. It was colder than the ice that made pearls out of the dewdrops and morning light bulbs in the grass heads. Nothing would ever unlock its secret senses. Using her own trail-finding mechanism as well as the anklet, for she didn't want her senses to rust, as happened in the nursery story she had heard as an infant, she soon found the house ant trail and was surprised and alarmed that when the smell of the house ants was received by her antennae, she could feel her abdomen arch and her mandibles prepare for killing. She was surrounded now by a smell that was alien and hostile, and yet it was the smell of her own species. If a house ant had come upon her path just then, she would have been the attacker. Fortunately, none came, and as she advanced further toward the nest, she licked as much of the house ant smell as she could, though it sickened her to do this, and then anointed her body with it. And though she had not completely rid herself of the smell of the garden ants, she hoped that she would meet and feel less hostility. Climbing the stairs was hard work. The trail was made at the side, along the foot of the banisters, and halfway up there was a tiny high-rise apartment constructed in the banisters by one of the carpenter ants that had entered the country as an illegal immigrant. Mona remembered the news of it. Hadn't it been Pamela's uncle who had marched in protest when whole families of carpenter ants had been murdered, even before they could set Mandible into the country? The people called it fumigation. The ants called it murder. But one lone carpenter ant must have escaped and set up home in the new land. Mona continued up the stairs. It was late afternoon now, and it was cold in the shadow of the house, and there was still not a house ant in sight or scent. Taking her lawn handkerchief from her pocket, Mona wiped her face. Whew. Then she sat down, took off her shoes, so much bigger than the black button shoes of long ago, put on her 6 red resting slippers, and rested. Just then, a black ant appeared on the trail. A worker, not a soldier. "Hey!" it called, advancing with its antennae waving. "Wait," Mona cried. "I'm a house ant." The stranger stood, smelling and touching. He seemed undecided. "Oh, it's okay, as far as I can tell. Where are you going?" "Home. Among the house ants." "Home? I live here." The worker looked doubtful. "You may have trouble with the sentries, but good luck." He went on his way. He seemed agreeable, Mona thought. He reminded her of Nigel or Uncle Pogo. He might even be in the carrying business. Taking off her red resting slippers and putting on her walking shoes, she continued along the trail, up and up and up, and it was sundown when she reached the top of the stairs. She recognized it at once as the top of the stairs. Why hadn't she known it on her first day out of the nest? Here there was activity, eggs being carried inside from their sunning places, workers returning home with food, young ants resting or sharing the work or playing. Could it be the stair game? 2 soldiers, suddenly standing before Mona, barred her way. They advanced. Mona recoiled. "Please," she whispered. "I'm a house ant." One soldier said to the other, "Her shape's without question. She's one of us." The other argued, "Her smell is house ant. Her clothes are alien." Mona looked dignified. "I've been abroad. I've travelled. These clothes are specially imported." "That melts no honey with us," the first soldier said. "Identify yourself." "I'm Mona. Mona Minim." "The nest is full of Monas. What do you work at?" "Nursery and miscellaneous." "Who's your family?" "There's Aunt Theodora." "Aunt Theodora? Who's she?" The other soldier whispered to her companion. "You remember? She was killed in the war?" So there's been a war, Mona thought, feeling desolate. "There's no Aunt Theodora here." Mona felt ready to cry. Why didn't they believe her story? "I used to know Pamela. Pamela was my best friend." "There's only one Pamela. I'm Pamela. I've no friend called Mona. Except years and seasons ago there was a little ant, Mona Minim, who fell through the crack in the stairs and was killed on her first day out of the nest. That's me," Mona said illogically. "But you're not killed. You're alive." "But I wasn't killed." "I can see you weren't." Mona was, though. Poor Mona. "But I'm Mona." "Have you any other means of identification?" Desperately, Mona recalled the stair game. She began hesitating. "You know, the stair game? The stair game?" Both soldiers looked blankly at her. "I know of no such game," Pamela said. "The stair game," Mona pleaded. "Really, I know of no such game," Pamela said impatiently, "though there may have been. Infants play the strangest games." "But there was a stair game, a very famous game it was. You hid from Aunt Theodora, and you made a false trail into the corner where the eggs were sunning, and there was Tiggy and Touch, and hide and seek, and then you swung on the spider swing." Pamela was looking thoughtful. "There used to be a special spider swing in the corner when I was an infant." Then she came closer and smelled and touched Mona once more, And then, with an awakening wonder and memory, she exclaimed, "Are you really the little Mona Minim who fell through the crack in the stairs on her first day out of the nest?" "Yes, yes, yes." If they did not believe her now, they would never believe her. Pamela's voice was gentle. "Where have you been, Mona Minim?" Mona didn't know what to say. Pamela frowned and became a soldier again. "We're on duty. Go into the nest and find yourself a spare bed in our house. I live with Uncle Bill and Aunt Gloria. I'll come home later. I believe you, but you'll have to be identified by a committee tomorrow. You know what may happen if you can't prove your identity." "Yes." "Will you risk it?" Now, what would you do if you were returning home after a long absence and found that at first you were disbelieved, then half-believed, then believed, but told by your former best friend that you might still be imprisoned or killed in your own home? Mona did what any aunt might have done. She burst into tears, and with her tiny bundle and the ladybird handkerchief, she stumbled the few yards along the trail and into the nest. And trying not to heed the curious glances and touches of all the bustling ants who seemed so much at home yet so strange, she made her way along the corridor. She stopped a fat glowworm who was lighting his lamp for the night.
But it's the first time we've ever had to throw things together thinking, what do you need, you know? But I reckon now when I go home, I'll go unpack everything and sort of think, no, I didn't need that. And hopefully we'll never ever have to do it again, but be aware of things to take like family stuff and photos and that sort of thing. We have been back, we were allowed back for about an hour yesterday, and we shifted cattle, etc., and did a few things round, and we've jumped the fence and done it this morning. But we have moved them, and we're not allowed back up at this stage, and it could be tomorrow before we get back in again, but hey, you know, safety, etc. And there would be nothing worse if we all went back to our homes and then the fire came over and we all had to go again. So, I mean, I can understand it is, but I must say the liaisons and that have been wonderful. Down here yesterday, the meals, the food, the people in general, they have just been so good. Really impressed. We are with friends, no family around, but we have got friends, so it was great. But I was woken this morning at about 6:15 with the first helicopter.
Oh, yes,
coming in.
Yes, I mean,
but
I was just thinking you'd be hearing them.
Yeah, very impressed. Yes, no, it's really good, but it's a bit worrying to see all that smoke out there again this morning. Although I don't know what it's going to be like up on the hills. Saying tomorrow.
If you guys want to get that in the shade over there by the fire truck, we'll go stand up in a couple of minutes. Just where your colleague is over there.
Yeah. Sorry. I reckon if you guess. Yeah, sorry.
We're really on the ground here.
Hey Gus, just about to have espresso. No. Yeah, I'll put you a text when the press is over and then we can do it maybe. Okay. Thanks guys, talk soon.
Hey, it's Ben here in Nelson with the fires. Hey, I just thought I'd let you know, just in case, that the press conference is just a couple of minutes away from starting. Cool. Oh yeah, sweet. Oh yeah, cool. Good as gold. Awesome. Cheers. See ya.
Everyone, I'll just try and make sure that we can have the sign language interpreter in frame if everyone wouldn't mind obliging with that. Great, thank you. I'll make a couple of just opening remarks from what I've observed this morning and then move to take any questions. You'll appreciate that for any questions that are more technical, I will want to throw to those who are involved in operational management here on the ground. Very cautious about not wanting there to be any contradictory information at a time where people are really keen to know exactly what's going on in the situation at hand. Look, from what I have seen today, there is an incredible job being done by emergency services, volunteers, members of the local community here on the ground. It is a massive undertaking. As has been described to me this morning, it is dry as a bone. The rainfall compared to even last year has been low. The mayor described to me that they haven't had anything other than shallow rainfall since really October. So that is contributing obviously to the conditions that you see here today and the fire that they are working to get under control. It's a fire roughly of 22 kilometres in perimeter, so that equally adds to the difficulty, including the terrain and the steepness, adding to the difficulty of managing this fire. But they are doing an incredible job. It is well coordinated. They tell me everywhere I went, I asked, do you need more resources? And they tell me at this stage that they have what they need, and if they need more, they feel assured that they will get it. And so I feel absolutely sure that everything that can be done is being done. I want to acknowledge those members of the community who have been affected by this. I've just had a chance to speak to some of them. There's extraordinary understanding. These are individuals who have been evacuated as early as Tuesday, who understand the risk that exists. At this point, even if it looks like their home is in the clear because of the changeability of the wind, the fact that this continues to burn underground, it is still a very volatile situation, and I think people are being really understanding of that. The added complication of animal welfare issues, I'm hearing the community are working together to try and look after stock. There is still room at the showground for stock to be relocated if that's required, and MPI, SPCA, both on the ground assisting the community as well. I think that everything that can be done is being done under very difficult circumstances.
Prime Minister, can you talk about the $20,000 commitment to the Mayoral Relief Fund that you've announced this morning?
Yeah, I think it's really important to note that there are a range of sources of funding available under these circumstances. Of course, through the Ministry of Social Development, and of course then there'll be private insurance involved as well. What we're concerned about is always making sure that if we discover a gap, that we're already ready to fill it. There are welfare calls being made to families today, and what we've done is made sure that there is a pot of funding ready to go if there is any unmet need. That is initial funding, so we'll just keep in touch with the Mayor and make sure that whatever need exists, that we're meeting it.
In the last hour, police have put out a report of a possible drone sighting in this area. I know you may not have been briefed on that, but are you able to talk to drones around fires? I know there was an issue in Wanaka a couple of years ago with that as well.
Look, I mean, the message is simple. If you have a drone, putting it up into the sky right now is incredibly dangerous and inhibits the job that needs to be done here. I think it would seem pretty obvious to most people, but the message needs to be clear. The sky needs to be left open for helicopters and fire and emergency service to do their job, and that is not helping.
When you arrived here, what did you make of the enormity of the smoke cloud and what you've seen?
Yeah, flying in, you can see the true scale when you're in closer proximity. It is a significant fire, 22 kilometres in perimeter, 1,900 hectares. It is large, it is incredibly dry, all very difficult conditions, but they are doing an incredible job.
How close have you been to the fire and
Look, there is of course always the option of going into the sky, although there are helicopters that are being used for surveillance purposes. For me, I would rather take a brief on the ground and leave them to do their job in the sky, so I haven't got in that close proximity. It's that fine line between wanting to get a sense of it but not wanting to inhibit the job that needs to be done.
What did the family say to you over there? I know some of them were quite upset. What stories did they tell you?
Oh, they talked about actually being given a bit of a heads up that they might be evacuated, and they said that that was helpful to have that time. That they've since then thought a bit more about what they might take under different circumstances, but that they're being well looked after by family and friends. That the communication has been really good. They know what's going on. They know why they can't go back. They have been concerned about their stock, but they've also, in a couple of cases, been able to go back and move stock as the time and weather has permitted them to do so. So overall, a lot of understanding from those who have been affected.
There's been a lot of nice comments about how the agencies work well together during this fire. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, I've seen nothing but cooperation, incredible organisation. Everyone's really well coordinated. Accepting, of course, that coming in, this is a very much a strong community, and I think we're seeing that play out in the way it has been coordinated too. But nonetheless, it's a mammoth task, so an excellent job really has been done.
Prime Minister, how much have you heard about how the fire actually started?
I've seen what's been reported. Obviously, the focus right now is on containment and management of the fire itself. I imagine that investigations will obviously be undertaken and, if required, handed to police, but that's really another matter. For now, it's about focusing on managing the fire at hand.
Just one more question, please, Tim.
Yep. Things further?
No,
okay.
That's it.
Thanks
Great.
very much,
Thank you.
everyone. So I just want to leave to any questions you might want to put to the personnel here, those in leadership. Yep. Please, Kerry.
We heard at the community meeting this morning there was some concern about people's neighbours, their neighbouring properties. They're seeing really tall grass and thinking, well, even when this may be all over, there's nothing to say that that's not going to catch a light. And there was mention that there were enforcement notices issued over the past month. I believe over the past 3 months there were 20. Is there room for more enforcement under the Act, any further way, so that people are able to pick up that phone and know that they're going to see that dealt with?
Yeah, well, if there's concerns about the actual the size of the growth and that, we've got our check if it's all right site, so referring people to that, but actually getting advice and we'll have people go out and have a look and make an assessment of the fire danger.
Just a follow-up question on that. What do we know about the Rabbit Island secondary fire? Was that an ember from the initial fire, or is there speculation that it could have actually been started by someone?
Yeah, at this stage we don't anticipate that it's a result of this fire. It's an independent fire in its own right, but we've got investigators in there now looking at it to try and assess what has started that.
Any early indications?
At this stage it's too early to call for me.
When you redeployed resources to fight that fire, how did that affect the way that things moved in the Persian Valley fire?
Well, I think we've got an amount of capability we can draw on. At the moment we're not using that full capability because it's fluid. So it gave us the ability to deal with the rabbit fire, but we're more than happy with the amount of resource we've got available.
You didn't think it had a detrimental effect on this one?
No, I don't think it had a detrimental effect. If we needed more resources, we would have called in more resources. So.
I understand the decision's been made to reopen Rabbit Island today. There is some concern about why. Why take the risk at all? Why not leave it closed?
I can assure you we wouldn't take the risk to open it if we weren't entirely sure it was safe.
With the speculation this is possibly related to farming machinery or that kind of thing, what is your advice to farmers in the area operating some of this machinery, perhaps if they are in a rocky, mountainous area or that kind of thing?
Well, we've been doing a lot of work pre this fire and educating the public about how dry the conditions are. And not just the farmers, but everyone in the area knows how dry the conditions are, and they're taking those extra precautions just to make sure that it doesn't create an ignition source.
Gary, can you just give us a quick update on what the strategy is this afternoon for fighting this fire and the current weather conditions?
Yeah, well, at the moment what we've got is with the weather conditions, it's quite still for us. So, we're doing a lot of work around the perimeters, just really putting in place barriers. So we've got the heavy bulldozers and things making breaks, and then we've also got the aerial attack on it. There's areas where we'll lay retardant, and that's to ensure that if the wind is to pick up, that we've just got that protected from the fire spread.
I know there's concerns about the weather tomorrow, so is there anything in particular you need to do to prepare for that?
Well, that's why we're working so hard today. We can never predict the weather 100%, so we work on what we expect is coming. But today, it's actually trying to contain the fire into an area so that it's going to limit the spread.
You spoke about potentially having other resources that you could bring in. Is it worth bringing them in if that's the case?
Well, it's about the management of all those as well and making sure that it's effective in what we're doing rather than just throwing resource at it. So there's resource there if we need it, but at the moment we don't need it. We're comfortable with what we're doing and our approach to all that.
You mentioned before the education around knowing how dry it is and so forth. What would the frustration be if this was deemed to be farming related, given the education?
What would the frustration be?
Yeah, deemed that the cause was indeed farming, given education.
Yeah, well, I think, that's the importance of proactive education. Things happen at times, but the main thing is actually having people the awareness and creating that awareness so these sort of events don't happen. Because you can see the impact that it's had on the whole community from whatever's caused this fire.
How much information did you have
We'll
about
release
that?
you to go and do your job after maybe that last question.
Thank you, Prime Minister.
How much information did you have on that drone sighting, and did it put any aircraft at risk?
I haven't actually got any information on it at the moment personally, but like the Prime Minister said, drones and a whole big helicopter and fixed wing operation, the two don't really gel that well together. So.
Each year New Zealand firefighters go off to Australia or America, Canada to help fight these massive fires. How does that help in a situation like this?
Oh, it's so valuable for our firefighters getting experience, learning from those things, and they bring those skills back. So we've got the expertise here now that we need to deal with our own fires. So that's a strategy that we will continue to do in supporting our Australasian partners and with US and Canada.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your time.
Cheers.
huge
Absolutely.
potential, hasn't it, for smart contracts, they're called.
Yep.
We might be able to track a shipping container and bypass a whole bunch of complicated bureaucracy because it's open and visible and able to be tracked, right?
Yeah, that's right. It's fully auditable. And, companies like Walmart, for instance, they're using the blockchain technology to track food. So they can take a piece of food that they're selling within Walmart and actually trace, using blockchain, they're basically making their suppliers all adopt it, and they'll be able to track it right back. So say it's a piece of meat or meat in a pie, say, they can trace that piece of beef all the way back through not just where it came from in the country, but also the farm and also the paddock and also the cow. So, that whole traceability and public auditability is really, really significant.
So once again, the technology is neutral. That's how we
exactly
use
right.
it. Which brings us back to the $276 million case.
Yeah, well, that's right. And this is where the whole kind of unregulated nature of cryptocurrency starts to become unstuck. Now, there's not actually a lot you can do about this because of the way it's set up. It's not set up in a way that can be controlled. But, what it does mean is that sometimes there aren't the sorts of protections that you would expect when you're dealing with this sort of money. Now, sadly, a guy by the name of Gerald Cotton, who was the young founder of a Canadian cryptocurrency exchange, in fact, the largest Canadian cryptocurrency exchange called Quadriga, died recently. And that was sad, but it got really serious for Quadriga's investors and companies when the company realised that he was the only one who knew the password to a massive wallet that contained basically all of the money that they were holding, or the cryptocurrency that they were holding on behalf of investors. So around the equivalent of about 276 million New Zealand dollars. And the thing about this stuff is it's really secure. If you don't have the password, you can't hit the password recovery button and get an email to you. You don't have a bank that you can ring and get them to reset for you. They're just really, really secure. So there's $276 million of